The Denver Broncos are set to navigate life without Bradley Chubb, at least for 6 to 8 weeks after he underwent surgery on Wednesday. We take a look at some Broncos depth options. They made a roster move. We take a look at the injury report, and not to mention, it is crossover Thursday, so we talk with John Butchko, host of the Locked On Jets podcast. We break down all the action, and we preview Sunday's matchup with him on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome back into a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day. From the South Stands to the end zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside, as always, by co-host Sayre, Bedinger. Both of us, we cover the Denver Broncos for the Locked On NFL Network and 9 News. You can follow us on our social media handles. Not to mention, you can subscribe or follow the podcast on your favorite audio podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or the Odyssey app. Locked On Broncos is there for you every single day on the go, not to mention in video format here on YouTube. So do Sayre and myself a favor. If you love the content that we bring, please do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Broncos news content and coverage. And Sayre, my goodness, my friend, we have a lot to talk about and not a lot of time to talk about things here today, man. Great to see you. Let's jump right into the blotter right here. Obviously, the big news, Bradley Chubb had surgery here this morning to remove a bone spurt in his ankle. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. He's headed to injured reserve. Obviously, a big loss for the Broncos defense. And once again, we have not yet seen a full season of Von Miller, Bradley Chubb. I don't think we ever will.
I know, it's insane, man. And best wishes to Bradley Chubb, obviously, right? I mean, it stinks. It's been one thing after another for him. 2019, the ACL. 2020 ends the season on IR with the other ankle, right? And now this year has to have another operation on his other ankle. So definitely stinks for Bradley Chubb, man. And you hate to see that kind of thing. But you know, it's crazy. It feels like even though the Broncos have only played 2 games, there's 15 games left. And when you think about it that way, it's kind of crazy to put it in that perspective, right? I mean, most years that's almost the entire season. So, and even this year it is almost the entire season, right? It's still only one additional game, but man, the Broncos are going to have quite a squad in about 6 to 8 weeks, you know, with all these guys coming back. So we'll see how that goes. But man, I just want to really quick touch on something, Cody, just really fast. I got a number of people jumping into my mentions on Twitter after the news came out about Chubb having the surgery to repair his ankle, about, man, Bradley Chubb was a bust, you know, and I just cannot stand that kind of mentality. And it takes everything within me, Cody, and I know you can relate to this, to not lash out at those people. So I'm going to use this platform to just talk about the fact that Bradley Chubb is not a bust. And he came within inches of breaking Javon Curse's rookie sack record back in 2018. The record for sacks in a season by a rookie. He's been one of the best defenders on the Denver Broncos over the course of the last 3-4 years, when he's healthy, of course. Last season, even though he was hurt at the end of the year, he made the Pro Bowl, and that wasn't just based on his name. He played extremely well last season for most of the year, and we were able to count on him and rely on him week in and week out with Von Miller out for the season. So, man, it's just tough, you know? I mean, think big picture here. Von Miller had a torn ACL back in 2013 and was suspended to start that season. He's also now missed another full season in 2020. So obviously Von Miller has accomplished quite a bit more than Bradley Chubb, but at the same time, we're talking about a guy that's missed basically 2 full seasons in his NFL career, still able to be one of the best defenders, not only in Denver Broncos history, but NFL history. So slap yourself in the face with a little bit of perspective, lay off of Bradley Chubb, get off of the Josh Allen thing because nobody thought the Broncos should draft him back at that time. Get off the Shaquille Barrett thing because at the time it was the right decision. And even in hindsight, it's the right decision because you make that decision 10 times out of 10 going into the NFL draft. You have a chance to get the best defensive player in the entire class. You do it. You're picking number 5 overall for a reason. You can't forsake that opportunity, and you can't blame Barrett for leaving and going to a different opportunity, which, by the way, how much money did the Bucs give him as a free agent that year? $5 million. There wasn't a lot of people around the NFL that thought as highly of Shaquille Barrett as even the Denver Broncos did, right? So that's my rant, Cody. Bradley Chubb is not an NFL draft bust.
Yeah, and I think it's just silly, too, that fans get mad at a player for getting hurt. Like, Like the player wants to get hurt. I mean, it's unfortunate. It happens. And obviously, nobody's probably more disappointed they're not able to be on the field than Bradley Chubb. But the good news, Sarah, he will be back in 6 to 8 weeks. And that's going to be at a very crucial part because then the Broncos will start getting to the second half of the season. And that's where you start having most of your divisional matchups. So if he is back for those games and the Broncos are sitting in a good position when he returns, I think there's even more excitement here for the Broncos, for Bradley Chubb, and just the guys. But it's an opportunity for Malik Reed, Jonathan Cooper, Andre Mintz to get a little bit more. And the Broncos also made some roster moves, signing Micah Kaiser off of the Los Angeles Rams practice squad. He's going to be inside linebacker depth here for the Broncos. And Vic Fangio said during the practice period here on Wednesday that more than likely they're going to see how far he can get up to speed. And he also mentioned that maybe Baron Browning might play another position, which could mean Baron Browning could be an edge rush option for the Broncos. So that's an interesting angle to kind of follow there. But, the Broncos, they also signed Peter Tamopenu to the practice squad, and now he is there as well. He spent time with them during training camp. So Denver, they're looking at all these options in terms of depth. I don't think they're going to reach outside at this point, especially if they're looking in-house, maybe to a guy like Baron Browning, who's kind of been behind a little bit at inside linebacker. You put him at edge, his responsibilities kind of diminish a little bit in terms of the overall capacity, what he has to know. And I think with Justin Sternad back there at inside backer, it might make a little sense here. And you know what? It might actually be the best thing for Denver. So I'm looking forward to that, Sarah. And really just some quick notes here on the injury report. Mike Purcell did not participate in practice on Wednesday, knee injury, but Vic said, don't worry about it. He's fine. He'll play on Sunday. So you know what we're going to do? We're not going to worry about it. Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, they're going to be limited in action on Wednesday with some injuries, some soreness, and some bruises that they're dealing with, but they're expected to be a full go on Sunday as well. So Sayre, my friend, we got to lock in and load here on Crossover Thursday. We're going to come up here in just a moment with John Butchko. He hosts Locked On Jets. He's going to preview the matchup on Sunday with us as well from a Broncos and Jets perspective. We're going to have a little bit of back and forth there, and that's coming up here in just a moment. But before we get into that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode of the show. That is our good friends over there, rockauto.com. If you need anything for your vehicle, rockauto.com has everything. They have a website that is super easy to use and to navigate. If you're looking for something for your vehicle, you can quickly find it by using their search catalog. You can look by year, make, model of your car, brand, specifications, and even the prices that you prefer. And you get all that. RockAuto.com, a family-owned business, has been serving auto parts customers online for over 20 years of reliable service. When you need something in the fourth quarter, 2-minute warning, and you need to drive downfield, RockAuto.com is where you need to go for all your auto parts needs for your vehicle, whether you have something in the garage that you're working on, a restoration project, or if you really need something for your vehicle. They have a wide variety of things for your vehicle at really reliably low prices. And one thing I've bought from rockauto.com and I've always loved to use recently was the sun shield. If you live in Colorado, you know how hot it is around this time of the year. Even though we're starting to get to fall, I bought myself a sun shield to kind of keep the UV rays out of my vehicle. So every time I go to get into it, I'm not melting from how hot it is with the 108-degree weather here in Colorado. RockAuto.com makes it a little bit easier for me because they also deliver it directly to my doorstep, ladies and gentlemen. And the prices, like I mentioned, the thing is you don't have to pay 20%, 30%, 50%, or even 100% more at local chain auto parts stores when you have rockauto.com. Fast, easy, and convenient for you, for whatever you need for your vehicle. And I want you to go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts available for your car, truck, right? Lockdown Broncos in there. How did you hear about us box? So that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. It is Crossover Thursday all across the Locked On NFL Network. Week 3 is fast approaching, and we are joined here on the Locked On Broncos side of things. We're joined by John Butchko, host of the Locked On Jets podcast, and we're very thrilled to join John's audience here, Locked On Jets, to talk about Sunday's matchup between both teams. John, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing well, and I am excited about this Sunday because no matter what happens, the Jets will not lose to the Broncos' third-string quarterback this year. So we've already improved from where we were last year.
Oh, man, that Thursday night football matchup, Sam Darnold. I just remember Sam Darnold running for this big touchdown, 60-plus yards, and I thought to myself, like, man, this is ugly. And then Brett Rippon throws 3 interceptions. But it was like an entertaining back-and-forth game that, unfortunately, you probably remember this too with Greg Williams. Just all the defensive penalties just came back to kind of haunt the Jets. But you know what? There's a new regime in New York here, John, and I want to talk about Robert Saleh. I've been a very big fan of Robert Saleh from his time in San Francisco in terms of his leadership stature, and the way that he can run a defense is fantastic. But for the most part, he inherits a Jets team that, is undergoing a little bit of a culture change and a lot of change from Adam Gase. To you, what has been the biggest noticeable difference so far here in 2021 with Robert Saleh in comparison to a guy like Adam Gase?
It's funny to say because the Jets are 0-2 and they just lost their last game by 19 points, but this has been a more competitive football team than last year. Their first half against Carolina, now they looked as bad as they were in 2020, but the second half in last year, after that first half, they go out and they lose that game by 30 points. They showed fight in the second half against the Carolina Panthers. They made it a game, didn't quite get there, but you saw guys flying to the football. You saw guys playing hard into the second half. Now, week 2 against New England, you look at the scoreboard, it was ugly, 25-6. Jets lose by 19 points. That was really just because Zach Wilson had a terrible game. And I'm sure we'll get to that. He threw 4 interceptions, first 11 passes. He looked kind of lost. The rest of the team, you saw a lot of good performances. The Jets were able to run the ball. And over the last few years, it's been very rare to see the Jets control the line of scrimmage with their offensive line. But they did that. They were able to establish the run. And on the defensive side of the ball, they were able to limit the big plays. Now, look, this is an undermanned unit. This is not a unit with a ton of household names. You're playing a lot of unheralded guys. You're playing a lot of guys who are late-round picks. But they're playing hard, and they're preventing the big plays. They're flying to the football. They're making tackles. They're being physical. It hasn't translated to wins and losses yet, but there's a professionalism this year. There's a competitiveness this year that you did not see for most of 2020.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, us Broncos, observers, fans, analysts, whatever you want to call it, we can relate to that. And I mean, Vic Fangio has consistently made lemonade with the lemons that have been put back in his defense with all the injuries the Broncos have had. So obviously a couple of key injuries in focus for the Jets this season. I mean, just from an outsider's perspective, losing Carl Lawson, absolutely huge. Losing Mekhi Becton for however long that's going to be, absolutely huge. So how are the Jets kind of dealing with those two major injuries on either side of the ball?
The Carl Lawson injury really hurts. Now, they made a deal with the Houston Texans. They got another guy named Shaq Lawson, who is a pretty good player, and they only gave up a 6th-round pick. So it was a good deal, but he's not going to replace what Carl Lawson was supposed to bring to the table. And he's the one guy I would say was an unreplaceable player on the defense, because the way they want to play is they want to minimize the big play. They don't really have the corners who can play press coverage, so they're playing a lot of off coverage. They're leaving the underneath part of the field open. So that means you have to have linebackers who can move to the ball quickly. And over the offseason, CJ Mosley lost weight. The Jets actually drafted a couple of guys who were safeties in college and moved them to linebacker because they wanted to get fast there. Well, the issue with that is if you're playing a bunch of small linebackers, they're not going to be able to shed blocks. So Jets have gone big on the defensive line. They have a 4-man defensive line, but one of their defensive ends is John Franklin Myers, who really more of an interior type defensive lineman. And he's a good player. He had an excellent season last year, according to Pro Football Focus, top 10 in the NFL for hurries among defensive linemen. And he can collapse the pocket, but you need somebody off the edge if you're going to play that way, because essentially you're playing with 300-pound defensive linemen. You're not going to get a big pass rush out of them, which means you need a big-time guy on the outside. And it's something that's going to limit what the Jets can do defensively this year. There's no question about it. Again, I like the move they made for Shaq Lawson. They have a guy who was an undrafted free agent last year, Bryce Huff, who's in context pretty solid. For what the Jets got him for, he's an undrafted free agent. He's doing more than what you would expect. But Carl Lawson's going to be a difficult guy to deal with. It's going to be difficult to deal with the loss of Carl Lawson this year. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, the Jets actually do have pretty decent depth on the offensive line. They have George Fant, who moves from right tackle to left tackle. He's got experience playing left tackle during his earlier days with the Seattle Seahawks. And they signed Morgan Moses this offseason from Washington. Moses is a pretty experienced right tackle. In fact, if you looked at some of the big runs that I mentioned last week, he threw the key block on a number of them, a really good run blocker. In fact, in some ways, I feel like he should have been the starting right tackle over Fant. Fant's not going to be Mekhi Becton. The offensive line is going to take a hit, but this is the rare year where the Jets actually have decent offensive line depth, and they can, at least to a certain extent, weather the loss of Becton, even though you'd much rather have him in there.
Well, I think it's good to build on that depth, to get some of these young guys some valuable experience against a very tough pass rush that the Broncos do present. I think it's going to be a good challenge for them, but I kind of wanted to focus on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, with Zach Wilson, he's got a big-time arm. I mean, his one of his throws last week was clocked at 55 miles an hour. I don't know who wants to catch that, regardless with their hands. I mean, that's velocity right there. Because he's got such a strong arm, I think it's a little present. You're going to see him kind of throw balls into tight windows and test it a little bit. I mean, that's something he even alluded to. I like his press conferences as well, by the way, because he's very open. He's very candid, gives great answers. But I want to talk about one offseason acquisition I feel like will probably be a real big difference maker. I liked what I saw a little bit in the preseason, but how has Corey Davis come in from Tennessee and kind of fit in with the offensive mold there at the wide receiver position?
It's a tale of two games. Against Carolina, he may have been the best Jets player on offense. He caught a couple of touchdown passes. And I can tell you, like, even going to watch Jets practice in training camp, there was a real chemistry between Wilson and Corey Davis. At this point, Davis is Zach Wilson's go-to guy. Now, last week against New England, he lost his matchup against J.C. Jackson. There were a couple of interceptions that were intended for him. Of the four, the first two were intended for Davis. He was covered on the first one. He lost his matchup. Wilson should not have tried to throw the ball to him. And I would have liked to have seen Davis fight back to the ball a little bit harder. He maybe could have broken up the interception, even though the pass wasn't going to be completed. The second interception was a ball Davis could have had. Now, a bad decision by Wilson. He tried to force one down the field into traffic, but the ball did hit Davis in the hands. Not an easy catch by any stretch of the imagination. It was a little high. He had to reach back a little bit. He was kind of flying through the air, but for the money Davis is making, the fact he's the Jets' number one receiver, that's a ball you'd like to see him come up with. And throughout the game, he was really kind of blanketed by J.C. Jackson. That said, I think the Corey Davis you saw week one is going to be the guy you see through most of the season. I think last week, even though it was a bad game, was kind of an aberration. As I mentioned, there's a real chemistry between Wilson and Davis, and I think that that's going to flourish throughout this season.
You have to keep building on that, and obviously we're looking forward to that matchup. The Broncos secondary against Corey Davis. Braxton Berrios has been a guy that's been getting some run too on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, I'm looking forward to, hopefully at one point seeing Denzel Mims play for the Jets. I know that's been a little bit of a wait-and-see approach there, but, John, coming up here in just a moment, we're going to flip the script, and we're going to talk Denver Broncos in this matchup from a Jets perspective, how the Broncos might try to attack them, or even some of the other storylines that's currently impacting the Broncos, coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about the two sponsors of today's episode of the show. That's your good friends over there, BetOnline.ag and Get Upside. We are fast approaching week 3 of NFL action, ladies and gentlemen, and BetOnline.ag is your number one go-to for all your pro and college football action. If you need anything from contest information, updated odds, props, and contests, they have you covered at BetOnline.ag, the number one source for everything football in the 2021 season. Not to mention, ladies and gentlemen, you can get in on all the action by heading to the website, or you can use your mobile device to sign up today. You can get a 100% welcome bonus when you use promo code Locked On. That's double your initial deposit, courtesy over there, BetOnline.ag. From football, basketball, boxing to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline.ag has you covered for everything with the amazing offers that are around for the 2021 season. Don't miss out on the action. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action, your online sportsbook experts. And our good friends over there at Get Upside and listeners of Broncos Country are making up to 25 cents per gallon cash back every time that they use the Get Upside app, which is available and free to download in the App Store or Google Play. And when you sign up, use promo code Touchdown, and you could get an additional 25 cents on your first gallon when you fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back on your first tank today. And those who are very active, they have to drive for work back and forth. If you use your vehicle, Get Upside is something that you need in your pocket. And some users are making up to $200 to $300 per month just in cash back alone by using the Get Upside app, depending on how much you drive. If you're going everywhere, Get Upside has you covered, ladies and gentlemen. They also make it easy for you to cash out whenever you want, whether you have a bank account attached to it, your PayPal, or you can even get Amazon or e-gift cards for other brands as well. Download the Get Upside app today to start making money back and never have to pay full price again at the pump as long as you were using the Get Upside app. Once again, promo code Touchdown will help you get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank fill up today.
Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Jets, Locked On Broncos crossover show ahead of their Week 3 matchup. Well, guys, I have to begin by asking about Teddy Bridgewater. I know he was competing with Drew Lock for the starting job in training camp. One thing that I noticed that was kind of interesting about Bridgewater is that although he's a guy who has a reputation for being kind of a check down artist, it looks like he's been throwing the ball down the field the first couple of weeks. Can you comment on Teddy Bridgewater's performance so far?
Well, it's been pretty outstanding from our perspective. I mean, I think the expectations from many fans were so low going into this season that it would have been almost impossible for Teddy Bridgewater to not exceed the expectations, right? I mean, we know exactly what Teddy Bridgewater is. We know what he brings to the table. He's a journeyman. He's check down Teddy. He's this, he's that. So far, he's second in the NFL behind Russell Wilson by, I think, 0.2 yards in terms of air yards per target. So, I mean, he's definitely proven a lot of people wrong in that regard, just over the course of 2 games. We know it's a small sample size, but he also set a franchise record for completion percentage in a debut start back in week 1. He's done some incredible things. I think there's only 4 players in NFL history that have his completion percentage through 2 games, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Only 4 guys in NFL history have put up the numbers that he has. So it's kind of crazy what he's been able to do in a short amount of time, just kind of proving the quarterback competition, to be honest with you, like throughout the offseason, training camp, preseason, like everybody thought this is really, really close. And even Vic Fangio talked about it on a daily basis. Like, yeah, I mean, you guys can see out there's not a whole lot of separation. But, I mean, Teddy Bridgewater has been awesome in the first 2 games, which is kind of crazy. But at the same time, I think considering, like we talked about before the show, the Broncos are 2-0 to start the season for the first time in a few years. And it's definitely kind of galvanized the fan base a little bit. I mean, there's certainly some people who are still trying to poke holes in it. Well, it's against the Jaguars and the Giants. Well, it's this, it's that. I think there's plenty of reason for people to be excited about it at this point. And Teddy's been doing things like you mentioned with the deep balls, but not even just that. He's been doing a lot of different things in terms of playmaking, pushing the ball downfield on 3rd and 4th down when called upon. So he's been doing a lot of things that a lot of people, I think, didn't think that he could do.
Who are Teddy's go-to guys on this offense?
Well, one of them was Jerry Jeudy week 1. He had 6 catches on 7 targets. He had 72 yards and in the game before he went down with a high ankle sprain. And then last week it became Courtland Sutton, who was targeted, if I'm not mistaken, 12 times. He had 9 catches over 150 yards. No touchdowns on the day for Courtland, but he emerged as the next big target. So I'd say right now, if you look at the sample size and the data between Courtland, the next guy up in line, probably in terms of target, share right there, will more than likely be Noah Fant, just because of the amount of volume he'll see. But Tim Patrick in 2 weeks has caught a touchdown pass from Teddy Bridgewater. So he's kind of spreading the ball around a little bit, which you like to see. They've tried getting KJ Hamler involved a little bit more, but he hasn't made any of those plays just yet. So right now I'd say go Courtland Sutton, Noah Fant, Tim Patrick as those 3 primary targets.
How good is this offensive line?
It seems to be a bit of a work in progress, to be honest with you. We went into the season kind of feeling like, man, they're going to take a nice step forward, even with the Juwan James injury, kind of the question mark there at the right tackle position. With Mike Munchak now, and I believe this is his 3rd year as an offensive line coach for Denver. So everybody's kind of assuming, okay, they're going to take that next step forward. But Vic Fangio talked about in one of his press conferences earlier in the week, the fact that teams are really just throwing everything that they can at the Broncos to stop the run, and they're loading up the box. I mean, there was a number of plays the Jaguars had 9 guys in the box and then just a deep safety and then a corner out wide. So a lot of those different types of things, they're throwing a lot of different looks at the Broncos. And I think the offensive line is kind of getting blamed a little bit for the lack of like really big chunk yardage in the run game. Everybody wants to see perfect balance, right? Teddy Bridgewater has done a really good job of throwing the ball against these stacked boxes, but the running game has been a little bit more tough sledding. I mean, it's been a lot about Javonte Williams kind of making yards after contact. Melvin Gordon has one big 70-yard run that's contributed significantly to the Broncos' total run yardage total. So, but we talked with Tim Jenkins on another episode earlier this week about the offensive line. We asked him about that, and he said, look, like the offensive line, I think, is playing really well. So to the naked eye, watching the games, it kind of seems like, man, it's really tough for the running game to get going. What's going on with the offensive line? Or Teddy Bridgewater's getting pressured a couple times here, though, or he took 3 sacks against the Jacksonville Jaguars. What's going on with that? But like Tim mentioned to us, Teddy likes to hold on to the ball a little bit longer, and the run game has faced a significant amount of things that defenses are throwing at him to try to make Teddy Bridgewater beat these teams. And so I think overall the offensive line has been solid, but maybe not quite the expectations that everyone had going into the season.
Now, heading into this week, many Jets fans were terrified about facing the 1-2 punch of Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, the bookend pass rushers. It seems like the Jets may have a little bit of a reprieve with Chubb's injury. Who's the next man up in this Denver pass rush?
Well, kind of like last year when Von Miller was out against the Jets, it was Bradley Chubb, it was Malik Reed. Malik Reed is now going to be opposite of Von Miller. You're going to see a rotation of Andre Mintz and Jonathan Cooper behind Malik Reed. I'll see spelling those guys from time to time, but you're going to primarily see those two guys who've been working very closely together since 2019. Von has taken Malik Reed under his wing, and he's been a tremendous surprise player, and obviously he stepped up in a big way last year for the Broncos after Von went down with an injury, so he's going to do the same thing here opposite of Bradley Chubb.
This looks like a really, really solid Denver defense on paper. Is there any weakness that the Jets could exploit in this game that you guys see?
Well, you just saw Josie Jewell go on IR with a season-ending pectoral injury, so that's the main communicator of the defense. Alexander Johnson has been around for a while now, but he hasn't been the main communicator of the defense. It's been Josie Jewell. So now you've got either Alexander Johnson or potentially the young Justin Cernod coming in and being the main communicator of the defense, and there's an opportunity right there, I think, just in terms of communication. Hey, the Vic Fangio's defense, we know his scheme is all about guys being in the right place at the right time all the time. And so that could be potentially an issue. I think also, too, with the injury to Bradley Chubb, can they get enough pressure off the edge to let that coverage hold up on the back end? Those are my two primary questions, I would say, especially going into this particular game.
Well, guys, here's to a great game on Sunday. I feel like Jets fans have a certain kinship with the Broncos because for all those years, you were what stood between New England and the Super Bowl. So hope we have a good game, and I wish you luck the rest of the way.
Absolutely, John. Thank you so much. Looking forward to this matchup. I'm a big fan of Zach Wilson. I want to see him have success, and obviously I want to see Robert Saleh have success as well. I know it's going to take some time, but I think that the Jets have the right guy in place, in position, and I'm looking forward to a very fun matchup this Sunday.